All right. Well, we are back for season 3 of the Heromakers podcast. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hi, Laurie. So good to
Hi.
see you.
It's good to see you. And I feel like I owe our listeners a little bit of an apology because we were planning on taking like 2 months off and then it turned into 6 months. And I'm sure that you guys understand this because, as we've mentioned before, we have other jobs. And so our other jobs got in the way, but we missed you guys. And so now we're back. And what's been happening in your world for the past like 6 months? Because our last episode was back in May, April or May, I think.
Yeah, well, I was a project lead for a global hackathon. And so it happened in October, but we started planning in March. And in the end, we had 1,200 people participating from about 41 different countries and about 131 cities. All really using their skills and their gifts of technology to solve world problems, like things that are happening in their city that they see that they want to address through technology. So that was really, really fun, but also really time consuming.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing how technology, right? We can still do things like that, especially with a hackathon. I mean, that kind of lends itself to the time that we're in. And I think I told you that was like on my bucket list of things I want to do is be part of a hackathon, but I have no idea
Really?
what I'm doing. So it's going to stay on my bucket list forever. It's never going to actually
Well,
come
now
true.
that I know.
But yeah, I know. Well, and here we are, season 3. And I do have to tell you guys that we have like amazing lineup of guests coming up for the season. So hang with us. And like we did last time, feel free to send us ideas of people that you'd like us to chat with. And we will certainly follow up on that. But okay, so Ann, we have to get to our guest today, Lauren McCann, because we were just chatting with her for a long time before, and you guys are missing out on how amazing she is. But Lauren McCann, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. It's so wonderful to be with you guys. I love your energy.
We have a lot of energy here. So all you guys who are listening, we all are in the 6, 7, 8 block of Enneagrams. So we're fun people who have a lot of desire to change the world. So it's really fun, which I know you guys do. But Lauren, you head up this consulting firm that you just launched last year. So you left your job, which we have to talk about, a job that you loved, to start this consulting firm called Calliope. Is that right?
Calliope, yeah. Yep.
Calliope Advisors, where you work with nonprofits and companies and philanthropists who are working to solve kind of big societal problems. And so you're kind of in that justice space, which I love. So we're going to talk about that. But I would love to just have you introduce yourselves to our listeners. Where are you located? And then tell us a little bit about your journey into kind of justice, wanting to make our world better. Like, where did that come from? Tell us a little about yourself.
Sure, happy to. And thanks for having me. So I'm part of the Great Resignation or the Great Quit, whatever it's called these days. And I think much like many people during the pandemic, started to really think about my purpose and where I could have the maximum amount of impact. And I was in an awesome job. I worked for an organization called Stand Together, and Stand Together invests in innovative solutions that help people improve their lives. And I was running one of the largest venture philanthropy efforts in poverty in America, and working on strategic partnerships to help scale impact. So I had a really amazing job working in the impact space. But I felt this tug as a leader to really lean in and be courageous, given everything that was going on. I think everybody was really impacted in different ways by the pandemic and the insecurity of that, but also post George Floyd, about like the role that they play and the role that they can play in creating a positive difference. And I just felt like I needed to bet on myself and build a portfolio and body of work that really aligned to my values and action. And so my firm was launched in March. And we are an embedded strike team for folks that really want to build, grow, and scale their impact. And so we've operated as interim executive directors, interim chief strategy officers, chief growth officers, chiefs of staff. So as people are looking for leadership capacity, we can really come in, drive transformation, drive change management, and help them accelerate their impact. And it's been life-giving work. It's been amazing. We have incredible clients focusing on bridging divides and combating injustice. And I'm really proud of what we built in a short amount of time.
Okay, so I remember reading your post on LinkedIn where you were talking about when you were leaving, what you were doing. And one of the quotes from one of your friends really stood out to me, Lauren. I think her name was Marlon. Was it Marlon?
Yeah, yes, Marlon.
Yeah. Marlon. If you don't build your dreams, someone will hire you to build theirs. And I thought that was really powerful. And I wonder like how many people are in that situation right now where they're kind of part of what somebody else is doing and dreaming, but inside of them they have something like a little voice, right? Like you're kind of talking about how you kind of sensed that something needed to be different and all this, and so what was it that like that finally led you to say, I want to dream my dream to make this world a better place?
Yeah, I had always been an entrepreneur. I'd been a change agent within organizations. So I was always tasked with like building the new thing, whether it was a sponsorship program or new program or imagining something differently. But I didn't feel completely free. I didn't have the agency per se to do it in the way I would want to do it. And so I got a lot of joy out of that building. But I realized if I really want to build something that demonstrates my values in action, I need to go out on my own. I need to have that agency fully, and that gives me the flexibility to speak out in my own voice rather than through an organization. So I felt like my career prepared me for this moment. I had been in leadership roles in philanthropy and in business, and I had the network established where I could make that leap and feel like confident in betting on myself. But it was a really sort of light bulb moment for me when Marlon said that, because at the time I had a pretty good offer from another organization that was very similar to Stand Together. And I thought to myself, I'm just replacing the boss, right? I'm just shifting my energy to another person rather than fully investing in myself and betting on myself. So it came at a time when I was teetering on, do I just go in-house somewhere else to grow, or do I pave my own path? And I'm so glad I did. Once I made it to this other side, I'm like, man, I should have done that a while ago. Like I have so much passion and energy for this work, and I'm able to bring it in a different way by having my own firm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can see a couple of things happening, right? Because of the Great Resignation and COVID, I think a lot of people's lives were just really shaken, where you can actually have the time to pause and then reevaluate what you're doing and where you want to go in the future. But I would love to ask, like, so what was it that, because obviously you were, I would say, maybe distracted with the other offer. You could have been distracted by continuing with the organization that you loved and that you were a part of. But what was it that really helped you like flip the switch and then shift?
Yeah, I think I saw in particular around racial justice a kind of false choice. And there was a lot of division between left, right on these types of issues, instead of people just coming together to drive innovation and action to address these issues themselves. So I felt like there needed to be more bold leadership and more of a focus on innovation and solutions rather than the things that divide us. And I wanted to work on projects where I was putting my mouth where my values were, right? So I was actually doing the work instead of just talking about it, and actually investing in solutions that would have tangible impact. So a lot of my projects are market-based solutions to close the racial wealth gap, right? It's galvanizing people to create action and help people in underserved communities that don't have access. Rather than debating what should be done, it's doing and creating real impact in the moment. And I guess I was just frustrated with the lack of action and wanted to be part of the action. For me, like my why is really grounded in my personal story. Before Stand Together, I was working in corporate America. I was in trade associations, working with C-suite Fortune 500 companies, traveling all around the country. And then when I shifted to Stand Together, I was in what was seen as the worst neighborhoods in America, in the prison system, working in foster care. And what I realized is that everything I thought I knew about poverty was wrong. And we often have like a deficiency mindset around people in poverty. We see what they lack instead of what they have and what they can contribute. And that changed my life, like being proximate with people in communities that were solving these difficult problems and realizing the potential in these communities if we invest in them. So I realized, wow, I can apply my skills to this work and have a dramatic impact. So I'm really grateful I had that spark then. But what brought me to Stand Together and why I wanted to shift out of corporate work was that I have a brother with severe mental health issues. And as a caretaker, as a sibling, as somebody who has had him live with them from time to time when he's having rough goes, I've seen the barriers that he's faced, getting work, getting access to opportunity. And so that was fueling me personally, and I just didn't know how to apply that professionally. So Stand Together really gave me that opportunity to do that. So that's really always the why for me, is like the people themselves that are impacted by this work and getting proximate and close to these communities.
Yeah, Lauren, that's interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody about some of the immigration issues on our border and what's going on there. And this person had went and visited. So he had traveled 2,000 miles. He was doing a story about what was going on there. And what struck him is that like he had been working in like the policy side of it, like immigration reform itself, but he hadn't met the people that were on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is that it illustrates the importance of like what you say, your term proximity. It illustrates that the need and the importance for us to draw near to people who are in totally different situations than us, but have so much to offer, right? So like on the strengths finder, like I have development. I'm a developer on there, right? So when I look at people, maybe similar to you, you see potential in people and it bothers you, like when the people when they're not able to reach their potential because of whatever situation they're in. Can you talk a little bit about, okay, so you mentioned about your brother, but just how, if we are going to change this world and impact this world and really be hero makers, which are people who inspire other people to live better, right? Where we move people towards making this world better. Why do we need to like put ourselves near people to do this instead of just like reading online and learning about things? Like why is the relationship component so critical?
Yeah, I think that empathy is such a huge buzzword right now, and so people misuse it. But having true empathy is really leaning in and putting yourself in other shoes and walking with them. And I think you do have to walk with people to truly understand and to better contextualize the complexities of the challenges that they face and ways you can be of service to them. I think in philanthropy in particular, we tend to be pretty paternalistic. Like we want to come in and save the world and help. And there's good intent in that. But oftentimes we're not listening to the people on the ground in what they actually need, and putting them in a position by empowering them to help them build upon their strengths and create sustainability in whatever situation they're dealing with. So, I think that proximity informs, and hopefully it informs in a way where you kind of let go of control and you do your best to be of service to the person and empower them towards the actions they want to take, versus coming up with ideas that you think might be helpful and kind of trying to orchestrate that from afar. I mean, ultimately, people are resilient. People in poverty in particular are some of the most resilient people in our country. They can stretch $20 further than anyone. And oftentimes we are thinking that we're helping, but instead we don't ask the question, what do you need? What do you want? What would be helpful to you to help you get to the next level, to help you get up that economic ladder, and give them the opportunity to tell us, right, what they would do if they had access to greater resources, for example. So I felt, coming into the work when I did within my role at Stand Together in particular, it opened my eyes to a lot of damage that's done by assuming what people need instead of just asking and getting out of the way and enabling them. And so I think that proximity is critical. And I think overall in our country right now, we've become so isolated, so polarized, so in our bubbles. We've lost like this shared sense of humanity, and we need to get proximate with one another.
Yeah, that's what was running through my head when you were talking, is that when we're in relationship, like really like close to each other, we become more human rather than a problem to fix or an issue in the world. They're actually people that we can walk alongside, and not just, I want to help them, but actually to walk alongside them. You mentioned the word paternalistic. So I was wondering if you could explain that a little bit more. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes when you think of like the parent-child relationship, we're kind of dictating down to people. And when we're trying to help organizations, we sometimes are forcing our point of view on how we should be helping them instead of actually empowering them with what they need. And so it's kind of a looking down upon versus walking alongside. And oftentimes we talk about, people kind of being bureaucratic and investing from afar, or dictating outcomes to nonprofits in terms of stating what their outcomes should be. And so I think in a lot of ways, philanthropy and other like government agencies have created a lot of pressure from above rather than empowering from kind of the ground up. So I think our nature, and unfortunately, because people don't get proximate often with these populations that are underserved, they don't really understand the root cause issues that are, a lot of them are systemic and aren't their fault. They're because of cycles of poverty and being stuck in the wrong neighborhood and born into the wrong zip code. And they might have all the grit and determination in the world. They just can't get over those humps. And so I think people often look at people in poverty and don't really understand that context and make a lot of assumptions around what got them there in the first place.
Lauren, what does that look like from from your work perspective and from a business perspective of fighting injustice, empowering people who are marginalized and underserved? Like, can you give us an example of what that would look like?
Yeah. So I'm on the board of the National Black Bank Foundation, and I was involved very early on as they were developing their model and approach. And a lot of people don't understand that a lot of underserved neighborhoods don't have access to capital. They don't have a local bank. They're often unable to get access to loans or credit to buy a house. And when you think about the compounding impact of that, it's everything. And Black banks and community-based banks have been a lifeline for a lot of these underserved communities. And unfortunately, over the last 50 years, Black banks were once, when Martin Luther King was around before his assassination, there was 50 plus Black banks in America. There's only 18 left. And when you think of targeted ways you could invest in Black communities, if you're supporting Black banks, you're supporting Black people, you're supporting churches, you're supporting nonprofits, you're supporting small businesses in communities that lack access to capital. So for me, I get super excited about a model like that. It's a market-based approach to closing the racial wealth gap. And what's really cool about that work is the National Black Bank Foundation pioneered a model last year. The Atlanta Hawks were the first major sports franchise to bank Black. And all these small Black banks came together into a syndicate so they could take down this loan, because on their own, they couldn't do it. They couldn't take down a $35 million loan, but 11 together could. And it demonstrated that Black banks can compete when given the opportunity to do so. And so as a business, we have a banking partner with a Black bank, Industrial Bank here in DC. So when you think about little choices we all make as a business and as a consumer about where we spend our resources, where we bank, where we shop, you have a dramatic impact in those small choices. We're also working on a number of projects to bridge divides. One of our current clients is Daniel Lebetsky, the founder of Kind, who, if you're a fan of Shark Tank, he's my favorite shark. He's the heart forward, empathetic one. And it comes from his personal story. He is the son of a Holocaust survivor, and he did a lot of work bridging divides in the Middle East. As he looks at the landscape here in the United States, he sees intense polarization. And so, what can we do to bring people together more effectively? He's launching a new initiative called Starts With Us, and with 100 other founding partners, of which I'm very happy to be a part of that group. And it's really about helping us build better daily habits so that we can collaborate with one another with courage, openness, and humility at the center, giving people the tools to do that, because we've lost our ability to see one another, as we were talking about before. So it's very aligned with my own values, and I'm lucky enough to get to work with a client that's so committed to that core principle across the country. So those are just a couple of examples.
So I had a couple of thoughts as you were talking, Lauren. One is, okay, this is very basic layman's term, but don't be lazy. Like that, as we're shopping, as we're living our life, it's easy to probably hit the buy button on Amazon, and we have, the it's at our door the next day and all this stuff. But I think that one of the ways that we can be a hero maker is don't be lazy. Like, do our homework.
Yeah.
Be intentional about like the different choices that we're making. The second thing that stands out as you're talking is collaborating for the sake of other people, right? So as you're talking, I'm hearing you get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then I'm hearing those who you're talking about get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So it's like, as we do our little part in this world, and as your website even says this, right? You have this little tagline, it says spark change. And so as we do that, we become smaller, but then all these organizations, as they work together, can become bigger and bigger. And there's like this, all this untapped, unlimited potential in that.
Yeah, 1,000%. Like, just on the gift giving alone, to preview, my clients are receiving this year a gift box from us in appreciation for their incredible work that they're doing. But we're giving them a gift box of all social enterprise products. So all of the purchasing power that I have as a business, I'm trying to pay it forward through the purchases of these gifts. And it's everything from candles that were made by women who've been sex trafficked at Thistle Farms, which is an incredible group in Nashville, Tennessee, to Greyston Bakery brownies, to Dean's Bean cocoa. We also have a number of other exciting projects in the box. But the point is, like, that purchase per client impacted women experiencing homelessness in LA. It impacted, individuals with intellectual disabilities. So the small things that we do matter, and our ability to use our own platform to help elevate these models so that more people gain awareness and more people start purchasing, I mean, that directly impacts the amount of people they can serve with their model. So for me, it brings me so much joy unwrapping these boxes and these gifts. In the soap that we bought, it literally had the person who made it hand sign each liquid soap bottle from this group called Everybody Inc. And they work with individuals with intellectual disabilities. So Kevin signed my liquid soap. I mean, that's awesome. So rather than buying Amazon, help support Kevin.
That's right. It's great. And we actually did have this woman, Doris Walker from Thistle Farms, on the podcast, and she was telling her story. She has an incredible story. You guys need to go back and listen to that. But I mean, just her story of overcoming, and great work. I mean, Thistle Farms alone.
I went to their, they have a meetup every Wednesday with the women at Thistle Farms. And I completely broke down the first time that I visited. And hearing all of their stories. And something that I'm very open about is that I'm in recovery myself. I'm 3.5 years sober. And I hadn't actually shared that publicly at the time when thank you, when I visited Thistle Farms. And all of these women around me were telling their story. And I'm there as the investor, kind of listening in. And I just felt, I was like, I gotta be honest about me and my story and share with them that I've struggled with the same things and that they can get through it. Like, so I remember being so nervous around these brave, amazing women that were opening up their hearts to share. I was about a year sober at the time. Like, this is new for me, and I'm still working through it. But the love that I felt in the room was amazing. That's one of my absolute favorite nonprofits and social enterprises in the country, because they're helping people through the dignity of work and housing and mental health and just giving people the space to heal. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I just want to say that season 1, episode 11, Doris Walker-Taylor.
Doris, episode 11.
So you can go over
Thanks,
and
Ann.
listen, because I think I got kind of weepy in that interview.
Yeah.
She's a really powerful story. So I feel like all of these heroes that we're interviewing, Laurie, are kind of intertwined, which is lovely.
Mhm.
I had the great benefit of getting to go to these places all over the country.
Wow,
It was
that's
like
great.
soul food.
So good, and just feeds your own soul, right? Of just like, yeah. Well, I feel like what you're saying though is you're asking people to go slower, because I feel like sometimes we're just so fast, whatever that is, quick fashion or fast fashion, and you just hit Amazon, but instead you're like, slow down, open your eyes and see what is happening, and be smarter with your choices. Like, for example, like, I'm a Canadian and we have Canadian national banks, but listening and hearing about a Black bank, I don't even know what that means. But can everybody and anyone open an account with them? And
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really Black owned. So when people are thinking about supplier diversity, that makes a difference. And oftentimes they're dealing with Black banks in particular, because they have, as community banks, they have to keep their resources within certain proximity to the communities they serve. And these are banks in the poorest communities in the United States. So any revenue they're earning is going directly back into that community. So it's a very targeted investment strategy. But yeah, anyone can bank and think about the impact that they're having through banking with these community banks, and know that those dollars are serving those communities. But when we think about, like, I was Bank of America for my personal accounts for a long time, I don't think about that impact, right? That I'm investing in them as much as they're with my provider. And so the consciousness around that, it's small things like that make a big difference when you shift resources into those communities. So I think you're right. It is about being intentional and thinking about how to live your values in action, and it's a journey. I mean, it's not like we're overnight can shift all of these things, but making one choice here and there adds up. And I hadn't frankly been exposed to Black banks before I started doing this work. I was introduced by the co-founder of the National Black Bank Foundation, who's a good friend of mine, Ashley Bell. And once he talked to me about it, I was like, that makes all the sense in the world. If dollars are circulating in the communities we're trying to help, why wouldn't more people bank Black and help support those institutions?
Absolutely. Wow.
Okay, so Lauren, I want to hop to your own personal story, because you had mentioned this, that you are in recovery. And so you recently, this is really fun, because I feel like it also is an example of you taking something and then you're investing into an organization that helps other people, right? So you recently, for Giving Tuesday, were raising money for an organization called the Phoenix, which you will tell us about. And you, for each donor who gave to your cause, you ran a mile. And so you ran how many miles? 27? Was it 27 miles?
29.
29 miles in what, 4 days or something like that? Like,
a lot
crazy
of miles.
amount. Okay, so and you guys know I'm a runner, so I'm like very excited about this. And I love runners who run for a cause too. And so I saw that and I was like all aboard for that. But
your sport.
tell us about kind of your own journey to recovery and what you've learned, and then about this other organization that now you are feeding into as a result of them helping you in your journey
Yeah.
of recovery.
Yeah. So the Phoenix is an incredible organization. They use physical fitness and activities and create sober, active communities across the country. If anybody's done sports, you know that it's a team environment, right? And in recovery, you really need that team to help hold you accountable and to motivate you, to inspire you. And when you combine that with activities like physical fitness activities, it's self-reinforcing. You feel better, you have a community of people that are on this journey with you. And what's awesome about the Phoenix is they proudly wear their sobriety on their sleeve. Literally, they have sober t-shirts. And so it's destigmatizing addiction. Addiction is a disease, and it's pervasive in our country, and it's non-discriminatory. It impacts lots of different people from lots of walks of life. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. And we should be proud of our recovery. And I think being around Scott Strode, the founder of the Phoenix, for many years before I really realized that alcohol was a problem for me, it gave me, it sort of modeled his behavior in action, him modeling sobriety and openness and his health journey. I think made me realize ultimately some challenges I was having with alcohol at the time. And to give you a sense, I've always been a high producer, achiever, successful person that's always doing too many things. And yet I was kind of a work hard, play hard person. I like to have fun and go out. I was in bands. I'm a musician on the side. So I was part of the culture of music and performing. And no one would have thought it was a problem because, frankly, our culture glorifies overindulgence with alcohol. Every major event, sports, holidays, I mean, mommy memes about mommy wine, right? Like mommy wine time, right? It's pervasive. So, nobody I think that was close to me was necessarily concerned because I was stable, because I had a good job. I was increasing in roles and responsibilities in my career. And it wasn't like I was waking up with a flask and drinking it all day. It was overindulgence when I had alcohol and my inability to stop when I had alcohol. But again, I would wake up the next day and do a triathlon. Like I was still pretty functional, and that's a functional addict. That is, alcohol's a poison. And so there was ramifications of doing that. It's a depressant. And I didn't realize the magnitude of it until I had my second child. My son is 4 now, and when he was under 1, I was definitely in the throes of postpartum when I look back. But I was using alcohol as my mechanism to get through it, to kind of push through it, and still showing up for work every day, still doing mommy stuff, but cracking that bottle open of wine. And again, our culture glorifies that as acceptable, but I felt awful. I didn't feel happy. I wasn't enjoying my new son. And there was this incident where I was bathing him and I was a little loopy, and he was young and he was a slippery baby, and he slipped and nothing bad happened. But in that moment, I thought, what am I doing? Like, what? I love my child. I love my life. Like, I need to seize my life. And I quit the next day. That was day 1. And once I hit 3 months, I started to be more open about it. And I think, again, because I was exposed to Scott and the Phoenix, and they were so proudly open about their sobriety, I thought, I don't look like the face of addiction, but there's so many faces of addiction out there. You just don't realize it. There's successful CEOs in recovery. There are many, many different types of people who are dealing with substance use disorder. So I told my story, and I was overwhelmed by messages, by people coming to me and saying, me too. And I've been thinking, I'm sober curious. What? And I'm now 3.5 years in. I've joined the board of the Phoenix. I recently joined the board, and it's such a privilege. When he called me and offered me a board spot, I got emotional because I've seen the transformative nature of their program. I ended up doing my marathon, and I raised money for the Phoenix for the Chicago Marathon. So physical fitness was already part of my life, and now I had a sober, active community to support me. They
Mm.
have 50 locations across the country where communities that gather for Phoenix activities. It's an incredible program, and they have half the relapse rates of a lot of institutional programs, because it's really about building that accountability circle, and giving people healthy outlets to build community in recovery. It's really interesting. In the last, I don't know, year or so, there's so many more sober bars and like sober like mocktails, and
Mm.
because I think people are realizing, yeah, I don't want to wake up and feel like crap. Like I actually want to go for a run and not have to have a tinge of a hangover. And anyway, I feel lucky. I mean, I did this before COVID, so I was already sober in the midst of all the stress of the pandemic, and I wonder, had I not made that choice, how I would have handled it.
Mm.
You know, the stress of not having childcare and dealing with the esoteric threat of a pandemic. It's been a rough go for a lot of people, and I share my story because I want to be a lifeline for people who want to talk about, you know, how they can get help. And I also do it because I want people to realize it's not just the person that's homeless drinking out of a bag. Like, there's so many faces of addiction, and it's non-discriminatory.
Well, I love this. And I feel like this is actually a good message leading up to the new year, too, because what you're saying, you're talking about intentionality. Like, I see that as markers in your life, right? When, okay, you quit your job to the job you loved to start a dream, and you recognize that there was, you know, how your drinking was impacting your family. Stop, hard stop, you know, find what you need to do. And I feel like that is a really good message for all of us as we get into 2022, as we look to the year ahead, of how can we live more intentionally in this life, whether it's through our purchases, whether it's through our job decisions, our family, personal. There's so many ways that we can be more intentional and not let life just kind of pass us by, right? Because it is easy. It's really easy to kind of get in that mode, um, of just, you know, it's like you're on autopilot. And at some point, I think we're all called to say, stop, take a hard look. Is this really how I want to be living? Um, as you look back over the past 18 months of the pandemic,
Mhm.
what are some of the highlights for you? Like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? And then we'll wrap it up there.
It's so I mentioned before, at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, I lost childcare, and I had two little kids. Um, you know, virtual learning for kindergarteners is basically tech support, you know, for little people, and it was a rough go. And so many people, whether you had kids or not, were in isolation. We're dealing with trauma, like we had collective trauma during this time. But what I saw, which was amazing, was small acts of kindness and community resilience in that trauma. I didn't know all of my neighbors before the pandemic. Some of these neighbors have become dear, dear friends, because as we were starting to, you know, look out for one another, if everybody had the groceries, like, we know the grandma across the street and the single parent here and the, you know, Capitol police officer up there, like, we have text chains that didn't exist that are now constant kind of communication with what has become an ecosystem in my community that's much deeper than it was before. And even just small things like painted rocks on the street and small little moments to brighten people's day, like, you saw like the human spirit come out. And I mean, I want us to keep that and capture that in moments when we don't have the crisis, right? To remember, you know, that we have each other's back and that we have connection to one another. I think for me too, I went from traveling all over the country every single week. I was on a pretty intense travel schedule, to being grounded with my kids. And I think what I'm excited about in this new phase is having more of the ability to have flexibility around travel, where I don't have to travel as much. Like, even though Zoom and Teams can be challenging to be on our computers all day, I'm not going to do a red eye anymore to California. Like that doesn't make sense. And I think it's allowed me a bit more of the ability to say no, um, and put up boundaries so that I can prioritize family, because I saw what I was missing by being so close and so connected to my kids throughout that process. So for me, it was a good reset of priorities. And when you talk about intentionality, yeah, I mean, I want to seize joy and seize purpose and make each day, kind of count by being intentional. And I do think the pandemic forced a lot of tough conversations for people around where they were prioritizing their time, and is it on the stuff that really matters.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to end it, about seizing joy and being intentional. So thanks, Lauren, for being on the podcast with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate that you guys are taking this journey of interviewing people across the country. It's so inspiring to hear the stories of the people you're talking to.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, give it a rating, share it with your friends, and we will see you guys next time.